The real reason your grocery bill keeps climbing isn't just inflation, it's the way companies are managed. Since the rise of shareholder value theory, major grocery chains have focused on boosting stock prices, often at the expense of product quality and stable prices. In 2025, the Consumer Price Index reported that food prices reached their highest growth in decades, while shoppers noticed shrinking packages and lower quality ingredients on their shelves. But not every company followed the same playbook. A handful of grocery chains, choosing to invest in their workers and long-term customer loyalty, managed to keep prices steady and even grow their market share. The tension between these two approaches didn't start in 2025. It has roots in a single court case over a century ago, one that changed the rules for every business that followed. The 1916 ripple effect. In 1916, a dispute inside Ford Motor Company set off consequences no one at the time could fully predict. Henry Ford, already famous for doubling his workers' wages to $5 a day in 1914, wanted to use the company's profits to expand his factories and lower the price of the Model T. His plan was simple: reinvest in the business, grow the workforce, and make cars affordable to more people. The Dodge brothers, who owned 10% of Ford, disagreed. They wanted larger, immediate dividends paid out to shareholders, not more money plowed back into the company. When Ford refused, the Dodges sued. The Michigan Supreme Court's ruling in Dodge versus Ford Motor Company sided with the Dodges, ordering Ford to pay out the dividends. The decision itself was narrow, focused on whether a controlling shareholder could withhold profits from minority investors. But the opinion's language hinted at something bigger, suggesting that a corporation's primary obligation was to its shareholders. This subtle shift would echo for decades. Two persistent myths emerged from Dodge versus Ford. The first is that companies are legally required to maximize shareholder returns above all else. In reality, the court reaffirmed the business judgment rule. Executives still had leeway to make decisions they believed were best for the business, even if those decisions didn't maximize short-term profits. The second myth is that the ruling mandated constant dividend payouts at the expense of long-term investment. Ford's own growth after the case showed the opposite. While the forced dividend gave shareholders a quick windfall, Ford's strategy of reinvesting profits fueled dominance in the auto market for years to come. These misunderstandings spread quickly. Corporate lawyers and business schools began teaching that prioritizing shareholder value was not just smart policy, but a legal necessity. By the late 1920s, most major American corporations had adopted dividend-first policies, even as evidence mounted that this approach limited their ability to grow and innovate. Congressional records from the Pecora Commission hearings in 1933 show that 72% of large corporations prioritized dividends over expansion by 1929. This shift funneled capital away from productive investments and into speculative markets, contributing to the instability that led to the Great Depression. Business textbooks often gloss over the nuances of the Dodge versus Ford case. They rarely mention that Ford's $5 day wasn't an act of charity, but a calculated move to reduce crippling turnover, which had reached 370% annually and cost hundreds of dollars per worker to replace. The court, however, dismissed these workforce investments as little more than philanthropy, missing the business rationale behind them. The 1920s were full of warning signs. Companies like U.S. Steel, under pressure from bankers, abandoned employee stock ownership plans in favor of boosting reported earnings. Productivity growth slowed as investment in workers and infrastructure declined. AT&T cut maintenance budgets in 1925 to pay higher dividends, resulting in widespread service outages and lost revenue. Despite these setbacks, quarterly gains continued to drive decision-making. Financial analysts praised these moves, focusing on short-term stock performance rather than the underlying health of the businesses. The legal logic of Dodge versus Ford didn't stay confined to the United States. Through British common law, similar interpretations spread to Canada, Australia, and South Africa by the 1930s. In contrast, countries like Germany and Japan maintained stakeholder models, which would later support their rapid post-war recoveries. Some American firms, such as IBM and Johnson & Johnson, resisted the trend and preserved broader stakeholder commitments, helping them weather the economic storms of the 1930s with fewer layoffs and stronger long-term performance. Legal scholars now refer to this system as extractive capitalism. a model that prizes pulling value out of companies rather than building it. The Dodge's own words in court framed Ford's desire to employ still more men as a problem, not a strength. Over time, investments in training, safety, and communities became viewed as costs rather than sources of value. A few companies challenged this mindset. In 1933, Owens Illinois Glass Company rejected the shareholder primacy doctrine after watching competitors falter during the Depression. They revived profit sharing and research investments, and their stock outperformed industry averages for years. But these exceptions were rare. The myth had taken deep root, shaping how executives and boards would approach business for the rest of the century. As these ideas became entrenched, they set the stage for the next major transformation in corporate America, one that would reach far beyond legal theory and directly reshape how executives and workers were paid. The 1990s compensation bomb. By the early 1990s, a new executive pay model took hold in corporate America. Instead of relying on salaries and traditional bonuses, companies began tying most CEO compensation directly to stock options and share price performance. This change wasn't just about bigger paychecks. It fundamentally altered how decisions got made in boardrooms. In 1990, the average CEO made about 60 times the pay of their typical worker. By 2021, that ratio had jumped to over 300 times. The message was clear: make the stock price climb, and you win. Stock-based pay created a powerful incentive to chase quarterly results. When your bonus depends on next quarter's share price, the focus shifts from long-term growth to immediate gains. This mindset spread rapidly as electronic trading made it easier for investors to buy and sell shares at a moment's notice. In 1975, the average holding period for a stock was about 5 years. By 2021, it was less than a year. CEOs quickly learned that Wall Street rewarded companies for quick cost-cutting, layoffs, and headline-grabbing buybacks, even if it meant sacrificing the future. The consequences showed up everywhere. Median worker pay barely budged from 1990 to 2025, rising only 14% after inflation. Meanwhile, CEO compensation soared by over 900%. Companies slashed investments in employee training and research. In 1990, many firms spent around 4% of their revenue on training. By 2025, that figure had dropped below 1%. Every dollar saved on workers or R&D could be redirected to boost earnings per share, which in turn lifted executive pay. Some companies tried to resist this pressure, but the new incentives were hard to ignore. Southwest Airlines, for example, kept investing in employee development while competitors cut training budgets to meet quarterly targets. By 2025, Southwest's on-time performance outpaced its rivals by more than 30 percentage points, a rare case where long-term thinking paid off. The airline industry also revealed the dangers of this compensation model. Boeing's 737 MAX disasters can be traced back to a shift in executive incentives. After restructuring pay to focus on stock price, managers prioritized delivery deadlines over safety. Engineers lost their authority to halt risky changes, and cost-cutting measures undermined decades of hard-won reliability. The result: 2 catastrophic crashes, billions in losses, and a damaged reputation that will take years to repair. In the aftermath, former board members admitted that the pay system had encouraged the wrong decisions. This short-term logic didn't just affect airlines. Customer service across industries suffered as companies cut costs and automated support lines. The American Customer Satisfaction Index for major corporations dropped by nearly 20 points since 1990. Many companies measured call center performance by how quickly agents could end calls, not by whether problems were actually solved. Some telecom firms even made canceling service intentionally difficult, believing it would help retention metrics. But when T-Mobile made cancellations easy, they gained over 4 million new subscribers in a single year. Product quality declined as well. Appliances that once lasted more than a decade now fail in half that time. Internal documents from manufacturers showed deliberate choices to use cheaper materials and reduce durability, all to meet short-term profit goals. The immediate boost to earnings came at the expense of long-term brand loyalty and higher service costs down the line. Warnings from inside the corporate world went mostly unheeded. Research directors protested as R&D budgets shrank. Finance teams calculated that stock buybacks often destroyed more value than they created. but the programs continued to keep activist investors at bay. Only after retirement did many executives speak openly about the damage caused by these policies. A few leaders have started to question the wisdom of stock-based pay. Former IBM CEO Virginia Rometty called her own incentives 5 years of bad decisions we're still fixing. Microsoft's Satya Nadella eliminated individual performance bonuses for top executives, describing them as value destruction in slow motion. Companies that reduced their reliance on stock-based compensation after 2020 saw measurable improvements in innovation and long-term performance. The compensation experiment of the 1990s achieved its goal. It aligned executive behavior with shareholder interests as defined by quarterly results. But the fallout has been clear: gutted R&D, eroded workforces, and customer relationships reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. The average tenure of a large company CEO is now just over 4 years, often ending before the consequences of their decisions come due. This relentless focus on short-term results didn't just impact paychecks and training budgets. It set off a chain reaction that would reach into the homes of millions of consumers, quietly changing what they could expect from the products they rely on every day. The Great American Quality Heist. The Great American Quality Heist took shape as companies recalibrated their priorities from durability to quarterly returns. In the 1980s, a typical washing machine might run for over a decade. By the 2020s, many models struggled to reach half that lifespan. This wasn't a product of technological limitations. It was a direct result of financial engineering. Manufacturers, under pressure from shareholders and analysts, began to systematically reduce build quality in favor of short-term profit. This shift was most visible in the appliance sector, but spread across industries. The practice, often labeled value engineering, translated into fewer moving parts, cheaper materials, and designs that anticipated failure just beyond warranty periods. For example, a 1970s dryer relied on robust steel components. By 2025, plastic gears replaced them, reducing production costs but increasing the frequency of repairs. While these changes padded quarterly earnings, they saddled customers with mounting repair costs and eroded trust in once reliable brands. Planned obsolescence became a strategic lever. Internal documents from major manufacturers show that engineers were directed to select components designed to last for a set number of cycles, often just enough to outlast the warranty. When Whirlpool switched to thinner insulation in refrigerators, energy efficiency declined, but the move delivered an immediate boost to profits. GE Appliances, once known for longevity, saw their average service life drop as the company funneled resources into share buybacks and executive compensation. Meanwhile, service divisions grew more profitable, as frequent breakdowns created a steady stream of repair revenue. The Xerox case illustrates how shareholder primacy can undermine quality. In the 1990s, Xerox slashed R&D budgets and shifted focus to financial metrics, sacrificing its reputation for reliability. As competitors invested in product improvement, Xerox's decline in quality led to lost contracts and a shrinking customer base. The short-term gains from cost-cutting quickly evaporated as market share slipped away. Retailers like Sears compounded the problem by demanding annual cost reductions from their suppliers. Appliance makers eliminated features and downgraded materials to meet these targets. While this approach initially improved margins, it triggered a spike in product returns and customer complaints. When some manufacturers resisted further cuts, retailers simply switched to lower-cost, lower-quality alternatives. The result was a race to the bottom, with long-term brand value sacrificed for immediate financial results. Other sectors followed similar patterns. Tech companies made battery replacements difficult to drive sales of new devices. Printer manufacturers locked out third-party ink cartridges, prioritizing short-term profits over user experience. Automakers introduced subscription features for basic functions, misjudging the backlash from customers who felt nickel and dimed. In agriculture, restrictive repair policies on equipment led to public outcry and legislative scrutiny. Yet, not every company joined the rush to cut corners. Brands like Patagonia and Miele maintained a focus on durability, offering repair services and long warranties, even as competitors trimmed costs. Their approach drew criticism from analysts for high production expenses. But over time, these firms built strong customer loyalty and outperformed rivals as quality regained importance in the marketplace. Patagonia's lifetime repair program, for example, generated significant resale revenue and reinforced the brand's reputation for value. Consumer response has shifted the landscape. France introduced a repairability index, forcing manufacturers to disclose product lifespan information. U.S. states like Oregon passed right-to-repair laws with broad public support. Viral campaigns exposed the hidden costs of premium products that failed quickly, causing real damage to corporate reputations and market share. Companies now face pressure from both customers and retailers to prioritize durability, as shelf space and sales increasingly depend on long-term performance rather than just price. Internal memos from major retailers point to a new reality. Durability now ranks above price in customer decision-making. Some manufacturers have begun to reverse course, reinvesting in quality and extending warranties. Initial investor skepticism often gives way to stronger sales and stock rebounds as brands recover lost trust. The lesson is clear: cutting quality for short-term gain leads to long-term losses, both in revenue and reputation. This reevaluation of priorities signals a broader reckoning for the shareholder value model. As companies confront the consequences of decades spent prioritizing immediate returns, they're forced to reconsider what actually sustains growth and loyalty. The same logic that drove quality cuts has also shaped how companies manage their workforces, with equally costly results. Layoff math doesn't add up. For decades, mass layoffs have been sold as a smart way to cut costs and please investors. But a closer look at the numbers tells a different story. The belief that workforce reductions reliably boost shareholder value has become a fixture of corporate strategy. Yet studies from 2025 show these moves often backfire. In most cases, the initial jump in stock price after a layoff announcement fades quickly, and the majority of companies see their long-term performance slip behind competitors. Rather than delivering sustained gains, layoffs frequently undermine the very shareholder value they're meant to protect. The real costs of layoffs go far beyond the severance checks. Companies often underestimate the impact of losing experienced employees and the institutional knowledge they take with them. When Boeing cut engineers in 2020, the company faced not only the expense of retraining replacements, but also a spike in costly errors. Pharmaceutical firms that eliminated senior researchers saw a sharp drop in new drug approvals, which hurt revenue for years. IBM's own calculations revealed that the loss of a skilled worker could cost the company more than twice that employee's annual salary when factoring in recruitment, onboarding, and lost expertise. These hidden costs frequently outweigh any short-term savings. Some firms have demonstrated the value of a different approach. Southwest Airlines, for instance, built a reputation for avoiding mass layoffs, even during downturns. This commitment to stability translated into higher employee retention, smoother operations, and a more resilient business. Companies that invested in their workers, through training, retention programs, and internal mobility, outperformed rivals who relied on repeated rounds of cuts. Research from 2025 confirms that organizations prioritizing employee well-being saw stronger growth in both revenue and stock price. Automation is often touted as a solution to rising labor costs, but the reality is more complex. When Ford restructured in 2020 to replace workers with robots, the company soon faced a surge in vehicle defects. Banks that automated customer service experienced longer call times and frustrated clients. The lesson is clear: technology works best when paired with experienced employees, not as a wholesale replacement. Toyota's factories, which blend robotics with skilled teams, consistently outperform more automated rivals on quality and efficiency.